So now I'm just going to go over tanking, starting with bot. And what I do as a feral tank is a little bit controversial. Depends on what your role is for the group. And currently, I'm supposed to be the off tank for my group. So I try and do a little bit more DPS than tanking. So I'm gemmed and enchanted for straight DPS, as well as all my reforges are for hit and expertise cap. It's not necessarily needed for pure tanking if you are tanking the entire time, but where I'm trying to get a little bit of extra DPS out as a pure cat in some of the cases, then I'm just basically doing that so I can push a little bit and we can push our numbers a little bit faster. But throughout this video, I'll be going over bot and how I look at things, how I determine where positioning needs to be. But you're kind of playing around your other tank and your group as a whole. So you kind of need to get a good feel of how the group performs and what they're lacking so you can try and compensate for them as best as possible, like popping your cooldowns, calling for extra cooldowns, and calling for specific raid type cooldowns that are needed just in case. All right, so starting with Halphus, I'm the tank that's first taking Halphus for this. So what I'm looking for is a clean pull from the start, getting into form, trying to throw in as much I possibly can, utilizing my cooldowns by getting a potion and using my synapse springs with my rage to get some extra threat into the boss. So once all the ads are grouped up, we're going to basically move back and forth on this boss, trying to stay on the front of the stage and making sure interrupts are going out as well on every single one. Once I get up to about 8 to 9 stacks of the debuff, I am going to um, call for a bop. I actually moved in the wrong position here. I should have moved with the rest of the drakes, and you can see me going to reposition here is just being next to the drake so we can get some good cleave on the boss as well. Uh, I don't like being this close to the edge because of a shadow. Uh, if one of his shadow novas goes out, you could possibly get knocked off if you're facing the wrong way, and it could happen to even the DPS too. So you just have to make sure that you're communicating with your other tanks to get the right pathing for this fight. So now I'm currently at 7 stacks and 9 stacks. I should be calling for a bop here soon so I can drop the stacks. What I'm going to end up doing while the bop is going, so I'm going to AoE taunt so that um, all of the drakes are on me during that time. Then I'm going to taunt Halphus back after the bop falls off. You should try and have a cancel aura for Hand of Protection in at least a macro somewhere. I have it on my other druid. I just forget to get it on this one. I, I usually macro it into taunt, so that way it's a little bit easier to get the aggro back and just have them hitting you. We did lose our off tank on this, one of the off tanks on this point, which is the warrior tank, which is fine because we only have the two left, and we can technically just leave him dead during this entire rest of the phase. But I'm currently at 4 stacks and I'm still doing great. He is slow enough. We should have also released Slate when we only had time. Um, and he accidentally taunted the boss, which again is fine. The debuff should fall off before I get up to the stacks that I normally would call for a. So now that we're basically on the last one, I still have a couple cooldowns I could use as well. You just kind of want to use your cooldowns when you get low enough in HP or call for an extra cooldown. We still have a pain sub available, so we could have used that. I still have my frenzied regen available, so there's always that as well. You just got to make sure that you're utilizing all the cooldowns you can possibly look into for this fight and just kind of rotate in between your 2 to 3 tanks depending on how many tanks you're doing it. For 25 men, we choose to 3 tank it, but I do die, and the boss should die here shortly anyway, so it does not matter to me too much. Okay, next we have the Twin Drakes. This will be on Heroic. So for the Heroic difficulty, you have ads that spawn in the Twilight Realm. A lot of the time, I'm going to be DPSing on this fight, just because we are sending our DK into the Twilight phase with the first group. A second group then goes down the with me on when I get 5 stacks. So he's just coordinating to placing them right below each other for some extra Ellie Shaman cleave, some DK cleave, whatever cleaves that we can possibly get on the Drake above. Avoid the breasts as much as possible, and pretty much just doing DPS things right here. I do have my tanking trinkets on because I am tanking about 50% of the time. So just making sure I'm getting ready to utilize everything I could possibly use to survive long enough. Um, Technically, I could drop one of the trinkets if I really wanted to probably an agi one and do a little bit more DPS. But I don't think DPS is the issue. I think survival is more important than DPS. Um, it's pretty straightforward for the first phase until he goes down, which is shortly after the second breath when Dazzling Destruction goes out. He should get his last stack. So he should be at 4 now. He's about to get his 5th in about 10 seconds. So I'm pretty much getting ready, and he gets his last stack. I'm taunting the boss immediately after he goes down and moving the dragon away from the Dazzling Destruction so that we can keep DPSing it as much as possible. You can kind of see me go straight back to the middle so I can get a little bit of cleave. And then once they drop, I'm straight taunting and swapping to the other Drake and keeping them underneath each other so that we can get that extra cleave out. Utilize your cooldowns when you feel like is necessary that you need the extra cooldown. I don't think I used a lot of cooldowns on this fight because like I was getting topped up almost instantly. I could mitigate a lot more damage if I utilized cooldowns, just rotating them through and through. But I'm wanting to save them for these oh shit moments. One of our healers needs to be moving, and I need to be a little bit more. Basically, I have all of my cooldowns up at this point in time, and I haven't used a single one other than my bark skin I'm using on cooldown. I'm really good at using bark skin on cooldown. I tend not to use frenzied regen or survival instincts unless I absolutely have to, which I should get a little bit better on using it. But there's such a long cooldown, and this fight is only about 3 minutes for us. I'm kind of saving them for the moments I really need them the most. So I'm at 4 stacks now. I'm telling the other tank that he needs to come up here soon. So he is up now and about to get the 5th stack. I'm telling everybody to stack on me for second group and shifting just about now. So I shift, and I'm not even worried about any of the ads. My main priority is to find a portal, out, just get out. I'm looking around and I don't see any portals, but I see one right next to the boss, so I'm taking that one, and then going back to cat form and DPSing some more for the majority of the rest of this. You do need to avoid the fires when you do go down. That is a big thing. Hopefully, you have somebody calling it out for you. We swapped to a different strategy where if we were calling for middle is not safe or middle is safe, that way we don't have to move at all during this phase. The more that we don't have to move, the more damage we can get out, the easier it is going to be for us to kill this boss. As long as the ads are cleaned up downstairs. For the Twilight phase, I technically could stay down there for a little bit and pop some cooldowns there, but I just don't feel like it's safe for me to stay down there for too long because I'm going to be stealing heals from the DPS that will actually kill those things a lot faster than I will. So right here's where we're going to do another tank swap um, just before the end. Uh, at this point, I'm basically saying that he doesn't need to go back down, but he's wanting to go back down. Um, so he taunted it back from me. Don't know why he would want to go back down. There are like very few ads left up, like six, maybe seven at this point. There might be a little bit more than that. Yeah, looking at it now, it's there's a little bit more than that, but I think he somehow got a reset and just taunted it straight back. Not sure how, because I think you do have to go down to get it, but he just wants more DPS to go on the boss, so he kind of just stays up and we just burn the boss at this point. They're, like I said, only tanking about 50% of this fight, so technically I could drop my trinkets for more DPS trinkets with Agi on them, or, just stats for DPS, because this fight can be solo tanked by quite a few classes if they utilize their cooldowns correctly, just not a bear, in my opinion. I feel like that bears for their tank spec should be spec'd more into DPS, just because there are 7 out of the 13 fights where you can get a pretty good significant portion of DPS. Um, the dragon comes down and it is dead. We lose a couple people, but that is fine. Let us move on to the next boss. All right, so for this one, we are separating the ads out during the specific ones. I'm taking Fludius at this point. He's taking Ignatius. Um, the strategy here is to try and keep them further away from the ranged so that we can get the fire from Fludius, but we stack them too close to the range so we don't get the fire. That's one thing I pointed out to our tanks recently. I'm looking at the timer pretty much the entire time. I'm not paying attention to anything else. I am just looking at the timer, and when it hits about 8 seconds, I start to drag out. Range continue to focus Fludius and get an interrupt on it as soon as the glaciate is done. So glaciate's coming out. I'm running away so I don't take extra damage, and I'm focused going getting those two bosses right back to each other. So my main priority is now to look at the timers, trying to get a little bit extra DPS as I can to help even them out. Fludius is a little bit higher than Ignatius, but it is okay because this is just normal. On Heroic, you want to try and get them down to about 25% at the same time. That way they're doing this transition about the same time. For this one, I am tanking Terrestra, but I think he taunts off Terrestra and I just take Arion, which is fine. It doesn't matter which tank really gets which, as long as they are on tanks, then it's fine. As soon as this transitions, you need to be looking for a tornado ASAP. Just getting in that tornado to get safe from the quake. Then once the quake goes out, like it is now, you want to next look for a vortex and get grounded so that you can avoid the thundershock. It's a lot of rinse and repeat on this fight. On Heroic, there are a lot more mechanics that go on during the phases. It's a lot to go over, and they deserve like their own little thing for just specifically Heroic tanking on this fight. Because there's a lot more movement that you're going to have to do as a tank. There's a lot more coordination you have to do with the other tank. So you should also be coordinating your DPS to kill them down at the same time so you don't have high health on the elemental monstrosity at the end. As soon as this is all done, with the RP, it's just straight DPS from here. No have to worry about tanking unless the tank dies, which is a very rare case. But yeah. All right, next we have Cho'Gall. We did quite a few heroic attempts on Cho'Gall recently. Not much changes from the normal to heroic version of it, except for you can kill the elementals, and it's just less tank damage going out, less raid damage going out when you're killing the shadow. So, and then the less tank damage is for the fire. I noticed a pattern with the elementals. They always spawn just in front and to either the left or right of him. For the fire ad, he always spawns it to the right of him. For the shadow ad, it's always to the left of him, where he's currently facing as the cooldown comes up. So you can see the Foji timers that we have. So as soon as the fire elemental cooldown comes up, he's going to pick the location of where that fire elemental is going to spawn. And see, just in front of him to the right. I basically am just dragging these ads to the boss, get a little cleave out once they hit about 50 to 40%. Then I am dragging them out and we are killing them that way. As soon as they are dragged out, ranged are still doing the kicks on them, and then they're going to kill the bloods that come after them. Once that is dead, I then look to see if there's any interrupts that need to go out, and I'm looking to taunt. So our tank now has two stacks of the Fury of Cho'Gall. Um, he said he's fine. It's just normal. So ideally, you can take up to like three of them before you really need to taunt. Especially with the DK, they can absorb a lot of the fire damage that comes from the fire elementals. So I opt into just getting a little bit more DPS in. But for heroic, what we end up doing is I end up swapping tanks with him, and he is just waiting for the next set of ads. He's asking me to take it here now, so I'm taking it. I'm moving away from the fire a little bit. It does cut the melee quite a bit because the next set of ads is about to come out. Can't really see anything from this positioning. But you really don't need to see much as a tank. Ideally, when you have the shadow and fire ads, you're basically just keeping them in the middle. Hopefully, you have enough mages to take care of them. He does bring the ad in and he taunts the boss back because his stacks fall off. So, therefore, I'm going back to DPS and just DPSing a little bit more. If he does need another taunt swap, he'll call for it. But ideally, you want one tank to do this phase as much as possible. One that can actually, do a little bit more DPS while they're tanking, and you can just swap. All right, now that I've covered the entirety of bot of what I've progged and what I've done so far, hopefully this helps a little bit on how you perceive to do your own tanking and when to actually utilize your own cooldowns or raid cooldowns.